welcome to Raw Deal, the channel where we discuss how to lead healthy, wholesome, and otherwise strong and beautiful life. Today we continue with the topic of cleansings, and in particular we're going to discuss another technique from a yogic arsenal from the tradition of yoga that allows one to clean the upper part of the digestive tract. As you may recall, we've already made a video in which we discuss how one cleans the entire digestive tract from the mouth to essentially the anus, right? And that technique is called Shankha Prakshalana. So there's a video about that. Possibly we'll include the link in the description of the current video, so you can check it out. However, there's also a way to cleanse just the upper part, in particular the part that involves the stomach and everything above that, including the mouth and perhaps the pathways that connect the two. So why would we want to do that in the first place? Well, I would say there are a couple of reasons, and these reasons can be essentially split into two categories. One category is the physiological part, and the other part is let's call it energetic part. So we'll tackle the physiological part first, because this is the part to which everyone will be able to relate, whereas the energetic part perhaps will require, I'm not sure if I should call it a little faith or belief if you haven't had certain experiences, or perhaps some kind of imagination on your part. So we'll leave that aside for now and get back to it in a second. So the physiological part, if you've ever learned anatomy of the stomach, then you might know that stomach is essentially like a bag that has an in and an out. And oftentimes this out is located not at the bottommost part of the stomach, but slightly higher, thereby creating a little bag where stuff can accumulate on the bottom. So you imagine if you have a tank of water and your drain plug for that tank was located not all the way at the bottom of the tank, but say maybe some distance from the bottom. Then there will be a tendency for water or liquid or whatever you're storing in that tank to accumulate, and you will not be able to drain the whole thing. Well, similar things could happen in the stomach, especially if the person suffered from overeating and the stomach is pretty stretched out, and sometimes there are other issues that could lead to that. So unprocessed and undigested food will accumulate there and will just remain there without actually passing down to the intestine for further digestion and processing. And that causes issues because that sits there and rots, creates unpleasant smell, bacteria procreate, and the person's mouth can reek, right, unpleasantly, and these are just some let's call them cosmetic phenomena, but of course this could lead to some health issues as well, right? You have stuff that just literally sits there and rots, and one way to get rid of it is actually do this cleanse. This cleanse roughly consists of the following. So we're going to drink salty water, and I'm going to mention the concentration. The concentration is roughly, so let's say if you have 1 liter, or for the English world, for the imperial units, you have 1 quart of water, and you want to use about 1 to 2 teaspoons, sometimes with a small heap of salt. I suggest you use something like sea salt, or perhaps the pink Himalayan stuff. That's also good. Try to avoid using the regular salt, because that's bleached using chemicals and may not be very good for your body. So just something natural, and maybe raw. There is salt now, that's salt that's actually not pure white, not like my shirt, but it has perhaps like dirty sand type of color. So this type of salt is all right, but anything closer to natural salt you can find will do. So we're going to drink that, and you want to make the water room temperature. And by room temperature, I don't mean if it's really hot in your room, but you want to make it not cold to where it's ice cold, but cooler than your body. And the reason we want to do that is because if your water is warm, and say you have the water that's body temperature, then when it goes into your stomach, rather quickly it will go down and pass into the intestine. In this particular cleanse, we don't want to do that. In fact, we want the water to stay in the stomach, accumulate there as we keep drinking, and then when the stomach gets full, we're going to empty it out, right? So that's the whole idea. And the reason why cooler water will do that, because the stomach in that case will act like a heat exchanger. So if you didn't know, when something cold arrives into the stomach, it will remain there for the duration of it getting warmer. So the body will try to prepare the temperature and will not allow the actual stuff to pass into the intestines, because intestines are much more sensitive organs than the stomach, and the stomach can really take a beating, if you will, and it will take care of the temperature gradient and make sure to really equilibrate the temperature. So that's what it will do. In our case, we want a little bit of that to happen, so we want the body to react with wanting to keep things in the stomach, so it will close the valve. There is a valve at the bottom of the stomach. I guess it's very much similar to the valve that's in your anus, so it's like a round thing that just contracts, the muscle contracts, and the pathway closes. So we want that will close, and then we'll keep drinking the water. So you want to drink until you feel that your stomach is full. So you will feel the stomach is located here on the left side, just where your rib cage ends. Kind of the left side here, the upper below the solar plexus here. So you will notice that area will bloat. That means the water is really staying in your stomach. So, and just to be sure, you can drink a little more after that, and perhaps you might even experience some vomiting symptoms, and that's actually kind of what we want to do. If you have those symptoms, that means it's quite good, because we're about to do that anyways. So if your body is on board and is willing to do that, so that's quite good. So we then want to go and empty that water from our stomach. So how we do that? Well, the best way to do that is actually bend over 90 degrees. So if the lower part of my palm here are your feet, so here are your feet, you bend over 90 degrees. So here could be a toilet or something, or if you're out, in the nature somewhere, it could just be grass or some bushes or something. So you bend over, that way the upper part, your torso, is parallel to the floor. It makes it easier to evacuate the water that way. So all the body needs to do is just push, and the water will not need to overcome any gravitational forces. It can just roll out of your body. So then there will come a part where we have to actually do something. So, and what we do is roughly the following. So suppose this is your tongue. This part is the front part of the tongue, so here will be the opening of your mouth, and here's the root of your tongue. So perhaps this palm even looks like it, right? If you look in the anatomy diagrams, your tongue kind of looks like that. So we'll take 2 fingers, and when I do it, about this, spread them this wide apart. So, and you start from the tip of your tongue, and you slowly kind of glide with your fingers towards the root, towards the back part of the tongue. As you do it, you don't really have to tense anything. What sometimes may need to happen is you may need to stick the tongue out a little bit, because as you press and touch there, the tongue will tend to react, especially if you don't do this kind of procedure very often. So you might feel some kind of inadvertent or motions that you weren't expecting. So just tense the tongue a little bit towards sticking it out. So you don't have to really try to stick it out like a snake, but just a little bit out, so it gives you enough space, so it doesn't kind of try to go up to the top part of your mouth, and it leaves enough space for your hand, for your fingers to slide there. So you get as far back as, if you open your mouth and look in the mirror, perhaps you may need a flashlight. So if you shine a flashlight, you will see that at the back of your mouth, at the top, there is a little thing that looks like a little icicle. It's hanging down. So I'm not sure the proper term in English, so I'm just going to call it the icicle that's hanging down. But I'm pretty sure it's an important part of your immune system and so on. So basically, once you see that, when you get far enough, sometimes you may experience that icicle actually touches the front upper parts of your 2 fingers that you slid down there. So that if you are there and if you feel that means you're roughly far enough. So some people have easy enough time to actually induce vomit. Others have a more difficult time. I typically have a more difficult time, and I will tell you why, because this is an important thing. So at that point, you may already be vomiting, and when you feel that something is coming, so you want to eject your hand from your mouth and just keep your mouth open. So essentially at that point, all you need to do is just relax, because your stomach, your body, your diaphragm here will push, and just make sure your mouth is open, and sometimes in a light way, sometimes like in a really powerful way, things will come out. So, and you essentially keep doing that several times. I would say my estimation is that it takes about 5 to 10 of these attempts to evacuate the whole stomach. Now, at this point, the procedure can end. If you're doing it, say, in the morning, if that's your morning routine, I highly recommend that if you're just training yourself how to do it, you can really make this a morning routine. It really helps to eliminate any kind of smell if you have issues with smell from the mouth, because it really cleanses everything that could possibly cause the smell. Because at the bottom of the stomach, there is a valve that will be closed. So really the triggers of smell is the stomach and everything above that. And here you are gently cleansing it with the salty water. By the way, regular water is also fine. I've also tried that. That also works. But if you want to have more cleansing effect, you do the salt with the concentration I described. So we can go ahead and actually drink some more water and do it again. Sometimes people really want to make sure they go through several rounds of this thing if they want to make sure that the cleanse is properly done. Sometimes people do it for the energetic reason. So you remember there is another category that we haven't touched yet that I'm going to talk about at the end. So we're still speaking about the physiological parts of how to do it and why to do it. So as you can see, it's rather simple. When you're finished, you simply can brush your teeth. There is a way to cleanse your nose in case something, as you were throwing up, in case something went into the nose. We also have a video about that. It's called Jala Neti. It's a particular technique on how to cleanse your nose. I also highly recommend that technique is adopted by you for the morning. In fact, if you only do one thing in the morning from the yogic arsenal, that should be that thing for your nose, right? Don't worry about the stomach, don't worry about any kind of intestine cleaning, but the nose. You need to breathe properly, and breathing is really important. We do it, several times a minute, so it's highly important. And that Jala Neti will allow you to do that. It's a really beautiful technique. All it requires is just an investment of about $10 or $15 into a small so-called neti pot, right? So a pot that has a proper shape that you can insert in one of your nostrils and cleanse your nose. So that said, that's roughly the technique. So I essentially described to you how to do it, and there's really not much to it. Now, that said, a lot of people may have reservations about it because typically vomit is associated with something bad, right? And this is exactly where I was. Because when I was a child, I would have a very sensitive digestive system. So whenever I ate something, I would pretty much know around 8 or 9 o'clock that night I'll be throwing up because I already didn't feel well. So I would tell my mother that she needs to prepare, some kind of a bucket or something near my bed, because I already knew that I might throw up. And when I threw up, I completely detested the whole process because I didn't like the taste, I didn't like the food coming out, I didn't like, just everything that was involved. So my understanding is that back in a pretty young age, when I was experiencing that, I obtained some kind of a mental imprint. So I really had a lot of desire to avert that. I had a lot of aversion kind of stored in my mind towards this idea. So first, when I was really getting into yoga, in picking up various techniques and adopting them, I saw this particular technique, and my first hunch was, no, I'm not going to do it. This does not sound like a thing for me. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that there's actually something stuck in my mind about this particular technique. And since I was able to really narrow down that there's something about that, I knew that to overcome that, it was exactly the technique I needed to do most. Because this particular technique was not just about cleansing. This particular technique would allow me to overcome some kind of the so-called sanskara, the imprint, right? The impression that was in my mind. So that's when I started doing that. And I will admit that the first few times I was doing it, barely anything came out. So I had these spasms when I was sticking 2 fingers in, and nothing was coming out. So maybe I could have drank half a gallon of water, and I would get maybe this much in the cup that came out after my 5 minutes of trying. So there was something, you could tell that there was something really, really suppressed and really holding it. So the body was really not willing to do that. So the mind was preventing it. But I worked on it every morning, and what I noticed that about on morning 4 or 5, I noticed that more and more started to come out. And after about, I would say maybe about a week or two of daily doing it, I think I took some breaks, maybe for a day or two, just because it was not convenient to do it on those days. And so then I would resume. I noticed that after about a week or two, I had a much easier time to evacuate the stomach. In fact, I noticed that I completely lost most of the aversion to the procedure, because what I did notice that most of the time, only pure water was coming out. So by the time I was doing it in the morning, if you do not eat late at night, say you stop at 6 and you're doing this procedure at 7 in the morning, if your meal at night was light, perhaps you had some fruit or a quick salad or maybe tea with some honey or something like that, there'll be nothing in your stomach. So the stomach will already be pretty clean. So when you do this procedure with the water, pretty much just pure water will come out, right? It might have some slight taste, not taste, but slight color, but that's about it. So that unpleasantness was completely eliminated. So I had a couple of times when actual pieces of food came out. And what I observed is that happened when I ate later at night than say 7 or 8 p.m. So if I ate around that time or later, then still around 7 in the morning, there would still be pieces of food in the stomach. So that tells me if you eat late at night, that never gets digested fully. So your digestive system just stops at a certain point and says, okay, I'm going to sleep. I don't care that there is food. I don't care that the job is not done. It kind of throws up its hands and says, we're going to deal with this tomorrow. So this is just one indicator of why it's really important to not eat late and stop pretty early in your day. So in fact, probably best, I've gotten pretty good at this, and I noticed that the really true digestive fire subsides at around 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So if you eat around 5 or 6, that's already pushing it, right? So 3 or 4 should be the kind of the sweet spot. And 5 or 6 or 7, that's already pushing it. And 8 or 9, say you go to bed at 10 or 11, that's probably not a good idea. So this technique, to me, on my experience, clearly illustrated that. So, okay, so far we've discussed the physiological part. I shared with you some of my experience, why I did this technique, why I think it's important, because it allowed me not only to deal with the actual cleanse, it allowed me to work through a certain mind imprint, which is always beautiful, because once you get rid of those, or at least one of those, your life gets easier and easier. You get happier and happier, because you literally feel, if you imagine on your body level, if you had tensions and cramps, and then those things start to dissipate one after another, you feel better and better in your body. You are more and more relaxed. Well, about the same thing happens with your mind. When you get rid of these imprints, the so-called sanskaras, as they are called in Sanskrit, then your life becomes easier and easier, and you feel more and more relaxed in your mind, which is a great thing altogether. So let's now discuss the energetic part of the technique. So this is where we get more perhaps into the yogic and Vedic tradition. So you're probably familiar with the so-called chakral system, where we have 7 chakras, 7 energy centers. So in Sanskrit, chakra just means it's like a knot, it's a wheel, it's a spinning thing. So it's a center where a lot of energetic channels in the energy body of a human being come together. So the root chakra is the Muladhara, right? It's the bottommost thing that's responsible for physical survival, kind of staying in the physical world. People, say, in the battlefield are functioning almost probably 99% of people on the battlefield are functioning at that chakra, because it's all about survival. It gets very animalistic, so all of your instincts, all of your kind of sights, and all of your vision and just hearing apparatus, everything is just attuned, right? You need all that. So that chakra is in full effect. So your consciousness is located there. Then we have Svadhisthana. It's the second energy center, responsible for the reproductive system. It's responsible for things like tastes. It's responsible for basic intelligence, right? So a lot of people who function at that energy center with their consciousness They may seem intelligent. I mean, that'll allow them to function in society. So we don't have to imagine that they're complete animals. But when it comes to the actual behavior, they might have certain tendencies, especially if that chakra, what you might call, has a hole in it, so it's draining energy, and that energy drain will manifest itself exactly like some kind of unwanted behavior. Perhaps it could be sex addiction. It could be addiction to a certain taste. Oh, I like something salty. Oh, I love spicy food. Or the sweet tooth is exactly that. It's the Svadhisthana chakra. So we're not here to discuss the entire energy system, right? Because each chakra is a topic for probably a 1 hour long separate video, but I'm just giving a quick breakdown to get us to the third chakra called Manipura. And Manipura is located typically slightly below your solar plexus. So you can see it's very much next to our stomach, right? And the reason it's important is that Manipura is the so-called human chakra, right? People whose consciousness is located in that center, they function pretty well in the human society. Those are the businessmen, right? The people who like to earn money, who kind of like the process of earning money, who like obtaining material things, and that's kind of what they're caught up in, and they're doing that. And that chakra is also responsible, especially when it malfunctions, for people obtaining quantity, right? So when somebody just likes to overeat, when they eat a lot, they ate one plate and they're looking at another, that's probably the problem with this chakra, right? So whereas the second one, Svadhisthana, was responsible for taste addiction, this is different. So this is where we are addicted to quantity, right? We need more. So a person collecting, it could be collecting knowledge. So you see the bookshelf with a lot of books back there. I used to be that way. So I know I'm speaking purely from experience here. It could be collecting knowledge, buying books and never reading them. It could be collecting stamps, right? Anything that involves kind of hoarding something or collecting or obtaining and keeping is probably due to this chakra. So to resolve problems, if a person has problems with this chakra, we do this technique. We call it Kunjala Kriya, right? The video you're currently watching. Because this technique affects the area, the physical area right next to this chakra. So it will stimulate things in a way that will actually induce the energy up. So we want to keep pushing the energy up to the next chakra, right? The so-called heart chakra, which, believe me, a lot of people say they're so fond of the heart chakra, and it's a really important center. But if it has problems, the problems there are just as terrible as with any other chakra, right? Because then the person falls in love, finds the object of affection. It could be a car, it could be, human being, or some kind of a girl they saw and talked to. Now they're spinning all these kind of daydreaming thoughts about that person. I mean, obviously it could go vice versa as well. So some girl could be doing that. So this is just some quick examples. I'm just saying that perhaps the problems may not be as damaging, so this is not some sex addiction as we might have on the second chakra, but when it comes to the person's life, it's just as damaging, right? Because it doesn't allow them to lead the full life without being attached and addicted to this whole process. So by doing the Kunjala Kriya that we're discussing, Kriya in Sanskrit means like a pattern, the things that you do in a certain order. So by doing this cleansing technique, we're actually affecting Manipura chakra, and we're forcing the energy to go up to the next heart chakra. So if you have any kind of problems that I described that are pertinent to the third chakra, you may really benefit with this technique. So anybody will benefit because it's a beautiful cleansing technique, completely natural process. You drink water, then you just induce vomit, right? Animals do it pretty often, cats do it, dogs do it, and so on. But on the energy level, you may really use this technique if you feel like you have some of these problems or behavioral patterns, right? Of course, you have to be really careful. I want to warn, if you have any kind of food or eating disorders, like perhaps bulimia and so on, it's really important that you kind of be watchful and don't just use this one video. You have to really read about this, perhaps, consult your, psychologist, a doctor. You can't just jump in. Because in that case, if a person is already throwing up their food and then eating again, the situation is already such that they're already throwing up. So clearly the disorder is of some other nature. So you don't just want to use this technique because it's then unclear where the technique ends and the problem starts, right? We can only use this for people who just stuff, and then just sit and they look at the food again 1 hour later, and then they want to eat again. So this is the kind of behavior we want to use it for. Or if you're hoarding knowledge, or if you're hoarding any kind of thing, if you are collecting material things, like really kind of immersed into materialism, this may really help you, because your behavior, your outward behavior in the world is only dictated by where your consciousness is in the energetic system. So the higher you are in the so-called chakral system, the more adequate and the more kind of realistic and the more pure your attitude and your view of your reality will be. Whereas the lower you are, and also the more messed up some of these energetic centers are. So you can be still quite high, and obviously the consciousness shifts. But if you're draining energy from some of these levels, then you will really feel how that affects, because that will manifest in the form of a certain behavior. So once again, the energetic part of this Kriya is that if you have problems on third chakra or lower, it will really try to unblock some things between the third and fourth chakra and keep things moving up. So there are other techniques for cleansing, stuff above the fourth chakra, but those are topics for separate videos. So I just hope you understand that this is not just some nice thing, but it's a very, very important energetic cleanse, and affects the energy system of your body immensely. And of course, the matter is secondary, energy is primary. So if we have a problem in the body, that means we have a problem in the energy body. So to address that, that's kind of the cause and effect. So we need to go to the cause part, which is the energy body, work there, and then the physical body and physical behavior will change accordingly. So once again, I hope this will benefit you. I hope you use it for your good and the good of perhaps people around you who may hear about this technique from you. I wish you well, and thank you for watching. See you in next videos.